The first $100,000 invested is probably the hardest money a couple will ever build. Not because you don't work hard, not because you aren't smart, and not because the system is completely against you. It's difficult because before that first $100,000, you're still relying almost entirely on your own labor to create financial progress. And that changes everything. Because without capital, every bill feels heavy, every emergency sets you back, and every raise seems to disappear way too fast. But here's the thing. There's a quiet rule that can help almost any couple reach their first $100,000 invested. And after that point, that $100,000 can eventually turn into $1 million. In this video, you're going to understand why the first $100,000 completely changes the financial game, and why this may be the most important stage in a couple's entire wealth-building journey. People love talking about compound interest. They see charts showing how investing can turn someone into a millionaire, and immediately picture the final result: financial freedom, passive income, a life without constant money stress. But there's one part of the story that almost nobody likes to talk about. Compound interest feels painfully slow in the beginning. Too slow. And that's exactly why so many couples quit too early. Because when you're still trying to build your first $100,000 invested, the numbers feel way too small to be emotionally exciting. You invest for months, sometimes for years, and the returns still feel almost meaningless. Maybe a few $100s, maybe a few thousand. Nothing that feels life-changing yet. And that's where the psychological trap begins. A couple looks at the numbers and starts wondering, is this even worth it? Because while the investments grow slowly, life keeps happening fast. The rent keeps coming. The bills keep coming. Unexpected expenses keep showing up. And that's the exact moment many people quietly walk away from the financial game without realizing it. Not because compound interest doesn't work, but because they quit before their capital became large enough to create meaningful momentum. Everybody wants the snowball effect, but almost nobody accepts the phase where they still have to push the snowball uphill. And that phase is exactly what separates couples who build wealth from those who spend decades surviving paycheck to paycheck. When my husband and I first got married, we weren't thinking about millions. We were trying to figure out how to save money without one emergency wiping everything out the next month. Rent, insurance, car payments, groceries, bills. It felt like everything showed up at the same time. And in the beginning, any financial progress felt painfully slow. Because without invested capital, every dollar still depended entirely on our own labor. And that's the part most people don't understand. Most couples believe the problem is income. They think they need to earn more, get promoted, switch jobs, work longer hours. But there's a limit to how much human effort can produce. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. Your body is limited. And that's exactly why so many people stay financially stuck, even as their income increases over time. Because they still depend entirely on their labor to survive. Meanwhile, couples who already own invested assets begin playing a completely different game. Their money slowly starts working alongside them. And that difference feels small in the beginning. But after the first $100,000 invested, it starts changing everything. Because for the first time, you stop relying only on your next hours worked to create financial progress. And that completely changes the speed of the game. The problem is that compound interest doesn't feel exciting in the beginning. And that destroys most people's patience. A couple invests consistently for an entire year. and maybe sees their portfolio grow by only a few $1,000s, sometimes less. And honestly, at first, it barely feels life-changing at all. Because while investments grow slowly, life keeps happening fast. The car breaks down, a medical bill shows up, the cost of living rises, an unexpected emergency hits. And suddenly, it feels like months of progress disappeared overnight. And that's the exact moment many couples start thinking, maybe we should just enjoy this money now instead. And that's exactly where the most dangerous wealth-building trap begins: lifestyle inflation. Every time income goes up, lifestyle goes up with it. A couple gets a raise, and suddenly new expenses start showing up. The more expensive car, the bigger house, the nicer vacations, the frequent dinners out, the larger monthly payments. And without realizing it, the extra income disappears before it ever becomes invested capital. That's one of the biggest reasons so many high-income couples still feel financially trapped. From the outside, they look successful. But behind the scenes, they're still depending desperately on the next paycheck, because almost all of their income has already been committed to maintaining a more expensive lifestyle. And the dangerous part is, this behavior feels completely normal. Society constantly encourages it. You work hard. You deserve to enjoy life. You can finally afford better things now. And of course, there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. The problem starts when every raise turns into permanent new expenses. Because if every extra dollar becomes consumption, capital never has the chance to grow. And without capital, that first $100,000 invested keeps feeling impossible. But if a couple manages to survive that phase, something slowly begins to change. At first, almost nobody notices it. The numbers still seem small. But then, the portfolio starts growing without depending only on monthly contributions. And for the first time, money starts carrying part of the weight alongside you. That's when many couples finally understand why the first $100,000 invested matters so much. Because before that point, every bit of progress depended entirely on your paycheck, your effort, your hours worked, your energy. But after a certain point, capital starts creating progress on its own. And that completely changes a couple's financial psychology. Because a 10% return on $2,000 barely changes anything. But 10% on $100,000 starts feeling real. Now the portfolio begins producing results you can actually feel in real life. And eventually, you notice something strange. Your investments begin growing faster than you can manually contribute. That's the moment many couples finally understand the real power of compound interest. Not because they became market geniuses, but because they stayed invested long enough for their capital to develop momentum of its own. And ironically, this is exactly where many people destroy their own progress. Because once their wealth starts growing, they become overconfident. They start believing they've finally figured out the market. And that's when the dangerous mistakes begin. They try to get rich faster. They start speculating. They chase trendy stocks. They take on larger debts. They inflate their lifestyle too aggressively. And without realizing it, they begin dismantling years of financial discipline. Because building wealth requires one mindset. But keeping wealth requires a completely different one. Discipline builds wealth. Humility protects wealth. And couples who continue growing wealth long-term usually understand something very important. The first $100,000 invested is not the finish line. It's simply the point where the game finally starts working in your favor. Because after that, the biggest risk is no longer earning too little. The biggest risk becomes destroying what you already built. At the end of the day, building wealth is far less complicated than people make it seem. People love turning money into something overly complex. They chase magical formulas, secret strategies, and the next perfect investment, when most wealth building still depends on a few extremely simple things: earning more than you spend, investing consistently, avoiding unnecessary debt, and staying in the game long enough. That's it. The problem is, simple doesn't mean easy, because the real challenge was never mathematical. It was always emotional. It's continuing to invest when progress feels slow. It's resisting the urge to compare your life to everyone else's. It's fighting the constant temptation to spend more every time your income increases. And most importantly, it's understanding that quiet wealth almost never looks impressive in the beginning. But after enough time, it completely changes a couple's life. Because once you finally build capital, fear starts shrinking, options start expanding, and the constant financial pressure slowly begins to disappear. And for the first time, you stop living just trying to survive until next month. That's why the first $100,000 invested matters so much. Because until that point, you're still trying to get into the game. After that, your capital finally starts playing on your side. So here's the truth almost nobody likes to hear. Building your first $100,000 invested will probably require more patience, discipline, and emotional resilience than you expect. Because this is the phase where almost everything feels slow, the results feel small, the progress feels invisible, and the temptation to quit shows up constantly. But this is also the exact phase where real wealth begins getting built. Because once your capital becomes large enough, everything starts changing. Your money begins working alongside you. Compound interest finally becomes noticeable, and your portfolio starts growing with a force that felt impossible in the early years. That's why so many couples spend their entire lives working hard, but never truly escape the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, but because they quit before their money had enough momentum to start working for them. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this: never underestimate the importance of the first $100,000 invested. Because compared to $1 million, it may look small, but it's the foundation that makes the million possible. And if you want to start building wealth together more intentionally, I also created a couple financial planner plus vision board for couples who want more clarity, better financial communication, and a long-term wealth plan they can actually build together. Because at the end of the day, the first $100,000 invested doesn't begin in the stock market. It begins in the quiet financial decisions a couple makes every single month. You'll find the link down below in the description and pinned comment. And before you go, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these conversations about money, behavior, and quiet wealth building. Because here, we talk about real financial freedom, not about pretending to be rich online. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is the hardest part about building wealth today? Saving money, avoiding debt, controlling lifestyle inflation, or continuing to invest when the results still feel slow? Let me know in the comments.